Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We could have as many as 200 people on this. We were up to about 182 registrations, and I'm really glad that you all have joined us. Many of you I see are raising your hands on, and maybe you don't know you are, but you are. And I've got a couple of things to tell you before we begin. First of all, Mark Rickel, who many of us know, many of you know from the enrichment group, his firm, who has helped us on so many capital campaigns around this diocese, and also is willing to help you through this time, pro bono even on some things. I sent that out to clergy a couple of weeks ago. He's on here as a panelist. He may join us from time to time talking, and at the end, I'm hoping I give him a chance to kind of recap some things and to say anything that he'd like to add. One of the reasons he's on today is I'm very hopeful that he watched both the earlier webinar that we did and this one, and perhaps your questions and some of just musings as we go along will help him to identify some topics that we may do webinars on later in stewardship. So that's why he's with us today. This webinar right now marks the second webinar I've ever done. The first one being this morning at 11. I think it went pretty well for the very first time. And so I hope this one does as well. Let's see, please do ask questions. You can do that best on webinars under Q&A, not on the chat screen. On the chat screen, if you'll use that to address to my two wonderful colleagues that are helping me with this, Carrie Allman, who's on here as a panelist to basically cover IT and any concerns we have while this is going on, and April Caballero, my executive assistant, who's on to help with Q&A and kind of help me stay on track and make sure we get the questions answered. So if you do that on Q&A, actual questions about this presentation, that will be a place you can find that. And if you have other technical issues or problems, to maybe do that on chat. I think that is what I have to share. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy One, we know that we cannot serve both you and our wealth. We will put our trust in one or the other. By serving you, we are saying that we trust you, that we love you, that we choose you. When you look at what we hold back, perhaps you wonder about that. Help us to give, Lord, for our own sakes, so that we can be free from the God of wealth, and so that we can find joy in our service for and to you. Amen. So today, I would say that this is a very 35,000 feet view of stewardship. Of course, from my own personal perspective, which are not all in alignment with all of yours or many others, but I want to share that. I hope we will be able to have some discussion. I'm going to hit a lot of different topics with the idea that we might be able to, in the future, hit some of these in much greater depth. But today I just want to present a few things, few topics that I think are important for us to think about as we go through and talk about stewardship and giving in our locked down world. Some may already be asking about the slides. We do plan to put these slides up on the website so you can have them all. We also are recording this, and so we hope to post the recording as well, so you could use it with stewardship campaigns, with vestries, for you to look at it again, whatever you would like. So we hope to have both of those things for you to review after we're finished. We're going to start with a poll, and we're going to do this a couple of times today. mostly because I just think this is so cool and I haven't used it before, so I've been trying to do it. But we're asking these questions because I do want to get kind of a feel for percentages out there. And the first poll I'm going to show in just a minute. We're going to launch the poll, and I hope you will all participate as you can, answer the question, and then I'll show you the answers. Some of you have done this before. The question is, what is your greatest concern or the most crucial information you need from today's webinar? So far, 82% of you have voted, about 127 out of 152. So I've ended it, and here are the results. Clearly worry about managing the expected decline and how things will change now. So uncertainty is kind of what a lot of people are coming to this with. And that's good in a way because that's how we designed this. So we'll come back to polling a little bit later. So I wanted to say that as we do this, we're going to kind of frame it. I'm going to frame this particular workshop under these 8 amazing secrets of stewardship that were given to me long ago. They were 7 at one point, but I've added an 8th one in there. We're going to follow this as an outline in the beginning of the webinar. And then we're going to talk about specifics, including giving by generation. We're going to talk about that later on as well. Now, one of the things about the poll that we just took is that there's a lot of concern about now. And I get asked this question a lot, mostly by clergy. And the last time this really came up, it really is now, but it did the first time in the 2008 recession. The question goes something like this in some way, shape, or form. How can I get people to give money during this crisis? And my answer typically is, well, I hate to tell you this, but it's work that probably needed to be done when times were good for it to go well now. It can be done, but it's going to be more difficult to do that kind of formation now. But here we are. We're in this moment. Whatever we didn't do before, we're kind of wondering about. What we need to do now is really on our plate. And so that's what we're going to try to do. But I just am flagging that to say that really the approach isn't that much different depending on where you are in the best of times or the worst of times. So in the 8 amazing secrets of stewardship, the first one is prayer, which we did. And then the second one is engage with Scripture. And especially for those of you on this call, a lot more of you on this call, lay people who are leading, leaders in your congregation in stewardship or on the vestry or in giving or just interested in this topic. And I think it's important whenever you gather to engage with Scripture. So the exercise I like to use with this is to look at the Scripture that is coming up for us, not to pull one of the all-time favorite stewardship passages that might be out there, the usual suspects, but to just pull from what we're going to see Sunday. And for instance, Psalm 23 is coming up this Sunday as the Psalm. So Psalm 23, one of the most known scripture in all of Scripture, one of the most recited. We're not going to get to do this today, but if we did do this as a study, I would ask you, how does Psalm 23 speak to our call for stewardship in the church? If you were preaching, that'd be the preaching question. How is stewardship in this psalm? And if you're doing a Bible study, the same question. People often say to me in the congregation, well, it's time for you to preach a stewardship sermon. And what I usually respond is they're all stewardship sermons, every one of them. You have to figure out how stewardship is involved in it. But to me, stewardship's a way of life, and stewardship is in every one of the sermons, and it's in all of Scripture. So we're not going to do it today, but it might be an example of what you would do is to engage Scripture, and don't go searching high and low for one that you think fits. Just go with what you have and ask the question, How is this about stewardship? Clearly, Psalm 23, the very first line, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I shall not want. There's a ton to do with that line about what it means to want, what it means to need. We can do all kinds of things in this about what's important. So engage Scripture when you're going about these. The third is rebuke scarcity. And of all of these 8, I think this may be the most difficult one for us as a church, because our society is pretty much mired in scarcity. Scarcity thinking, scarcity about not enough to go around, distribution scarcity, and of course that's heightened even more in this crisis. But in the church, we've really majored in scarcity. There's so many ways we exude this. Simple things like not printing enough bulletins in the morning because we don't expect any more people to come than usually do, or my famous one that so many of you have heard me argue about is the coffee kitty at coffee hour, which just screams to anybody who comes in that we're so poor here. We are so just scarce that we can't even buy you a cup of coffee. We need you to do that for us. I have been known to steal coffee kitties when I'm at coffee hours and I see them, because I just think they scream scarcity. We might as well just put on there, we are a scarce people. We don't have enough, and we need you to help us. So look for ways that you scream scarcity in your congregation and in your context and try to remove it. So some statistics. 49% of all giving to churches is given with a credit card. So in this time that we're in especially, and if you've been resisting online giving, this is the moment where you have to stop resisting if you expect to get pledges in and giving to your church. And this is a statistic actually from late 2018 or 2019. So these are behind even this most recent event. And yet 49% of all giving to churches is given with a credit card. 8 to 10 people who give to churches have zero credit debt. 60% are willing to give to their church digitally. So you have 60% of people who are willing to do it if provided the opportunity. Tithers make up only 10 to 25% of a normal congregation. And for the Episcopal Church, I would say it's probably on the lower end of that. Churches that accept tithing online increase overall donations by 32%. So we do know that online giving, especially in the environment we're living in now, and just in the world we're living in now, even before COVID, people do want to give that way. Only 5% tithe, and 80% of Americans only give 2% of their income. 2% is a pretty standard percentage that we see. Christians are giving about 2.5% of the income, and during the Great Depression, it was about 3.3%. So one way we scream scarcity in these moments especially, and it was borne out a bit on the poll that we took at the very beginning, that the greatest concern is what are we going to do about the decline? In other words, we have made the assumption right from the beginning that we're going to decline. That we're going to see less pledges. We almost succumb to that right away, which is a scarcity model. But what we see in a lot of research is that people actually are more generous when these kind of events occur and want to be giving to things that they're compelled to believe will help. And in most instances, the churches, especially for people that already love them and are part of them, they believe that's a very important and compelling thing to give to. Of course, in the Great Depression, people had less money, so the percentage probably was higher, but it's been proven over and over that people were far more generous with the little they had in those moments. Only 3 to 5% of Americans who give to their local church do so through regular tithing. When surveyed, 17% of Americans state that they regularly tithe, just 17%. For families making $75K, or more, 1% of them gave at least 10% in tithing. 3 out of 4 people who don't go to the church make donations to nonprofit organizations. Generally, we tend to be a generous people when asked, in and outside the church. The average giving by adults who attend U.S. Protestant churches is about $17 a week. 37% of regular church attendees and evangelicals don't give money to the church. So a lot of people just do not. 17% of American families have reduced the amount that they give to their local church. And I remind you, these are statistics from almost 2 years ago. So it's probably changed now. But even before this, these were true. 7% of churchgoers have dropped regular giving by 20% or more. We've seen that kind of trajectory for a while, even though the dollars often stay the same. It's an interesting thing we've seen, where there are less pledges, but the money is the same. In other words, people that are pledging are giving more, but there are less pledges. About 10 million tithers in the U.S. donate $50 billion, that's with a B, yearly to church and nonprofits. 77% of those who tithe give 11 to 20% or more of their income, far more than the baseline of 10%. And 7 out of 10 tithers do so based on their gross and not their net income. Now, often, if I'm in an in-person meeting, workshop like this, that's one of the questions I ask, or somebody will ask me eventually, is should we tithe off of gross or net? And I always answer, I don't care, because I don't care. What I would say is if we did either one, if you tithed off gross or net, if everybody did that, every Christian did that, we would have so much money that this conversation we're having today would be totally different. The average percentage is about 2%, as I said earlier. And that's true even in our churches, in the Episcopal churches. So 10% of net or gross, it does not matter to me. There are lots of arguments we can have about it, but I don't think it matters. Just pick one and try to do it. So I put crowdfunding in here because it's a hot topic right now. A lot of people are doing it. I've been regularly giving to one here in Seattle that revolves around giving meals to nurses and frontline responders. And that crowdfunding started as a goal of raising $25,000. The last update I got has it close to $200,000 now. So crowdfunding is really a way of raising money now that we see in our society. And I put it in here because I think the church can learn from it. And this is one of the things that we often fall behind on, I believe, and have some mythological thinking about. So we come up with wild ideas like this, a budget raising idea. This is fundraising. And we're really not talking about fundraising today. Certainly in stewardship, that's one of the things we hope happens, is that we gain funds, we get income. But for me, stewardship is about spirituality. It's about our faith, and it's a practice of our Christianity and our Christian faith that we participate in because it is important to our spiritual being. That's why we do it. It's not about fundraising. So on crowdfunding especially, the average number of updates that a successful campaign owner posts is 4. So many updates. In this one I just told you about frontline workers getting meals, I bet I've gotten, 25 updates since that started a few weeks ago. Constantly updating on how much has been raised and the next goal, because the goal has been bumped up over and over again. Crowdfunding campaigns get about 126% more donations when owners update supporters. So more communication, not less. And I think we can learn from this in our pledge drive, in our capital campaigns. there is always something to communicate, and we need to always be doing that and updating. Campaigns that are shared fewer than 2 times have a 97% chance of failure. Crowdfunding campaigns with personal videos raise 150% more than those that don't use videos. So especially in this time where we're all getting, whether we like it or not, a little more comfortable with Zoom and videos and sharing everything that way, this might be a time for you to branch into using videos for your campaigns, not just written material, but videos as well, to share your vision, to share the importance to the mission of the church, and to teach also about stewardship. Over half the people who receive an email about crowdfunding campaigns make a donation. In other words, the odds are for you in the first place of just starting one, that you will get donations. It's such a classic example of the only way, or many times the only reason someone will give to you is simply because you ask them. Asking and learning how to ask is so important. So the opposite of rebuke scarcity is the fourth thing: claim abundance. Claim abundance. We aren't always great about this because we are just majoring in the scarcity so often. We're not good at claiming abundance, of stepping out and going beyond what we think is possible. So we've got to really get better at this and look at ways to do this. But we already have their attention. Historically, religious groups have received the largest share of charitable donations in any year and any time. This has been consistent over the years, even with the decline in actual numbers in our churches. In most years, roughly 30% of all the donations, or close to 130 billion, goes to religious organizations. And most of this is accounted for by people giving to their local congregations. So that's good news for us in a way. We have their attention, they are interested, and they are generous generally. What we see is that 30% of annual giving occurs in December. 10% of annual giving occurs on the last 3 days of the year. And 77% believe everyone can make a difference by supporting causes. So we have generous people across the board, I think, even in and out of churches. We have many that are concerned about getting the tax write-off, so we see a lot of it in December. And the only flag I would say for you, beyond fundraising, but into the stewardship realm and the faithful stewardship realm, that these statistics might reveal, is what I often say when people are able to give their entire pledge in one check. Sometimes I'll respond to them, well, then you're probably giving too little. You know, a 10% gift of all of your income probably would take more thought and maybe a little more frequency than something you can do all at once. It's great when you can. Many people that have been able to do that have helped your churches through this 2 months. But it's also a question. It's worth a challenge to see if you can possibly give and get people to give on a more regular basis, because then it becomes a prayerful response. My practice is to give 10% of any money that crosses through my hands, at least 10% that crosses my hands, and to do that on a regular basis. That's what makes it prayerful, is that I do it every time. Not one time a year, not you know, with what's left over, but first. That's an important thing. I give it first, and I give it frequently every time money comes through my hands. This is what we need to be teaching to. So we're going to do another poll. Here we go. This is one question. These are all anonymous, by the way, so all the polling we're doing, I cannot see, no one will be able to see who answered what, so it is anonymous. This is a question that I often ask in workshops because I would say so few people know the answer. So be honest about this if you don't know it. It's a simple question. What percentage of your income do you give to the church? We witness as I said, about 2%, but what we also witness is most people, or many people, do not know. We're kind of preaching to the choir today, so you wouldn't expect to see a lot of that, but there are some honest people saying that today, that I don't know the percentage I give to the church. And we'll see here in a minute some of the reasons why that might be the case. Most of it revolves around our continued lack of willingness, fear about talking about money, which we really, I hope we will get over. So we're about a minute into the poll. Most people, 84%, have responded, and I'm going to end the poll and share it with you. So 3 to 5% is the winner, and that's kind of about right. We say 2.5% right in there is the typical percentage, but there you see that. And a reminder that all these will be, this film will be up for you to view again. You can see all these poll results again when we do that too. All right. The fifth thing, 8 amazing secrets. Don't build your campaign or stewardship formation around the budget. And this is still something that I see a lot of churches doing. And I always am trying to encourage you to disentangle these things. A finance committee definitely needs to do a budget. A budget is important for your operation, and somebody should be working on that. But I don't think the same people, certainly the same task is stewardship. Stewardship's a separate thing. And I would define it as not raising money, but instead a stewardship team, a stewardship committee should be creating an environment where people can be converted to and brought deeper into connection with the church and connection with their giving to their spirituality. That's your goal. Whatever the final number is you see, because of that, is totally someone else's issue to deal with. You hand that off to the finance committee later, and that's the number they have. But to build your stewardship campaign around a goal, I think is the wrong approach. And I think it actually limits, in what we say, limits the God's grace in a way, by saying that that's the best we can do. We can just raise this amount, or that's all we need to do. And it also makes it all about the church having or getting money, instead of it being about, which I believe it is about, your spirit, your spirituality, your faith, your walk with God, and the way that you show thanksgiving to God. Those are two totally different things. And it's important for us to really, I leave this on here because I think it's so vitally important, not just symbolically, but really in the way we practice. 6, devise plans, the vision of which you cannot conceive of achieving. So again, this is kind of like the scarcity idea, that we sometimes plan less in order to limit God's grace, and instead of planning boldly for what we might do with mission. And this is just an encouragement to, even in a time like this, to plan boldly, to lay out plans and visions that are inspiring to people, maybe even crazy to them, but show that you're not living in scarcity, but we're living in abundance. This is the one I told you I added. These were 7, I added 8, is this one, tell the truth and tell the story. And to me, this means tell the truth about where you stand. Today, one thing I'm trying to do is tell the truth about statistics in the church, about giving in the church. You can do that on a local basis, and you really should. You should try to do that. Tell the truth about the good things, the bad things. Talk about money more, not often. Be truthful about it. And tell the story is not only your story around money, but also the church's story around money, Jesus' story around money, and just the story of the gospel as part of what our stewardship walk is as a way of life. So I think this is really important that we are able to somehow meld these things together and make sure that when we talk about this, it's not some accessory, a necessary evil that we have to ask for church money to keep it going. I mean, one thing Mark so well reminded our group about this morning is one of the things that happens in moments like this, and quite frankly, almost always when we do the October Begathon, I hear lots of priests and clergy and stewardship leaders beginning with an apology to their people. You know, I'm sorry we have to do this, but we have to do this. It's totally the wrong way to go about it. This is a huge opportunity, and it is a Christian practice for us to give back. It is, I would say, crucial to our faith walk that we do it. So that needs to be reframed totally from, you know, a necessary evil that we apologize about to the great opportunity we have to give back. Our final poll that we're going to do today is a series of questions on this similar topic. So this is going to be 3 questions. I'll give you a little bit longer. These are interesting to me because I collect some of these question statistics to see how they're different now than they were. The 3 questions are: have you ever written or spoken to your congregation about your personal giving? Second one, do you believe the priest should know what parishioners give to the church? This is probably the greatest asked question I get, and maybe the greatest conflict. And then 3, what do you believe, acknowledging you do not know, will happen to income from pledges in your congregation during this time? So the poll is open, and I invite you all to respond. Yes, I've already seen one comment that number 2 needs another option. And I think I know what that might be, but I didn't want to give a third option. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but of course there could be. All right, we're going to end the poll. I'm going to share this. Have you written or spoken to your congregation about your personal giving? Many of you on this call probably have been involved in stewardship, so you have, of course, because you've testified to it. This is a little bit higher a percentage than we see often. If it was just a random group of congregation, I can tell you that this poll comes out very differently. Do you believe the priest should know? I'm glad to see 67% are saying yes, because that's kind of where I am. I would say it's actually spiritual malpractice not to know. And I can tell you, we could argue about that and probably have another hour webinar just about that topic, which I often do. And what do you believe, acknowledging you do not know, will happen to income from pledges in your congregation during this time? And you all will be glad to know, I think this is right, I don't have it in front of me, but this almost is exactly the same with clergy. When we asked them this question this morning, stay about the same is what won. And I think that's the hopeful, really hopeful response. 20% say it could increase, which I think is even more abundant and great. Because I think we do have great opportunity right now, and we have confidence in the people that give. So thank you for answering those, and we'll maybe in Q&A be able to mine some of those a little bit more, but there's a lot more to go. The 8 amazing secrets of stewardship. Final one is to give thanks. And what I want to say about this is not just give thanks to God for that it's over, we finished our stewardship campaign, but even more and more importantly, to give thanks to all those who give. We often drop the ball on this. It's kind of like we have collected all the funds and that's what we need to do and now we're finished. But I think always remembering to say and to say often, thank you for the gift. when I've started this in parishes I've gone to over the years, I've always surprised how many people tell me after the first time they've gotten a thank you note that something like they've been Episcopalian for 30 years and no one's ever sent them a thank you note for pledging. We really, really have to turn that around. We are a thankful people, and we need to model that with this as well. Now we're going to shift into giving by generations, and hopefully to break down some of the mythology about generations and generational giving. We have a lot of thought that young people don't give any money, and I think some of this will show you that's not entirely true. So millennials. Millennials make up about 25.9% of the congregation. 40% of millennial donors are enrolled in a monthly giving program of some kind. 46% give to crowdfunding campaigns. And you want to watch as we go through the generations how these things change a little bit as we go through. 64% volunteer locally, 9% internationally, 55% attend fundraising events. This is a big myth about millennials, that they aren't interested in any of that and don't go to any of those things, but they actually do. 11% of total U.S. giving comes from millennials. And 84% of millennials give to charity, donating an average of $481 across an average of 3.3 organizations. So it is a giving generation. Gen X, which I kind of straddle Gen X and Boomer. So this one and the next one, I straddle that. I'm right on the cusp. Gen X makes up about 20% of the population. 49% are enrolled in a monthly giving program. 45% give to crowdfunding campaigns. 64% volunteer locally, 8% internationally. 56% attend fundraising events. Email prompts 31% of online donations by Gen X. Now it's interesting, social media between the generations is a whole other thing to look at. Gen X tend to be a little more into email. And when you get to millennials and younger, they think email is kind of like a handwritten letter to some of the other generations as being old and out of date, and you're not going to get them that way. So it is important in stewardship and how we do giving to think about these differences in generations. Gen X most often fundraise for a cause. That's where they tend to be more generous as well as for a cause that they really believe in. Baby boomers represent about 23.6% of the population. 49% of boomers are enrolled in a monthly giving program. If you have been keeping track, it's about 50% of every generation so far is enrolled in some kind of monthly giving program. 35% donate to crowdfunding campaigns. That number is coming down if you're keeping track as we go through them. 71% volunteer locally, 9% internationally. 24% give because of direct mail. So now it's direct mail, not email, and not texting. So that's changing in the generations. 72% give to charities, donating about $1,200 a year across 4.5 organizations. So a lot of giving, percentage-wise, and to more organizations with more money. They've had a longer life to raise more money. Boomers are most likely to make recurring donations on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. And then finally, the greatest generation represent about 11.8%. This generation gives 25% more frequently than younger generations. 30% of the donors, 75 and older, have given online in the last 12 months. Now, I put this in there because many people, one of the mythologies is that older generations don't give online, but we actually consistently see that at least 30% of them do. 88% give to charity and donate about $1,400 annually across 6.2 organizations. So more organizations and a higher percentage of giving. They represent 26% of all U.S. giving to charity, 26%. This generation prefer voice calls. So now we're down to the telephone and direct mail. And they are generally late adopters of technology, but then they can become almost evangelical about it once they learn it. So I think I do all of this to say that some of the mythology we have about generations is not true. And at the same time, we do need to constantly be thinking about how the different age groups, different generations in our congregation hear the appeal and how they respond to the appeal. Very different and very diverse. And we should really be thinking about that as we develop campaigns and approaches. So now we're going to step into looking at that in a similar way, that when you look out to a congregation, when you're working with a congregation, you really need to have in your mind the fact that this is a very diverse group. Even if it doesn't look diverse to you, this diversity comes by the way they see money, use money, feel about money, and simply the stages they are in their life. And that's going to be different every Sunday. It's going to be different every year. It's going to be different people. But what you're trying to do, remember, as a stewardship committee, is to create an environment where conversion can happen, where a deeper walk into what it means to give and what that means for your faith happens. So creating that environment, you have to be aware that you're always going to have this mix of people. So this is one version of this, 6 steps in Christian giving, and they call them different things here. This is another one that I've shared with some of you along the way when we've done workshops, called Maslow Meets Jesus. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs meets Jesus. And Terry Parsons, who taught me stewardship, kind of came up with this, she and Hugh Majors. And it takes Maslow's hierarchy of needs and breaks this out by the percentage of these people that are probably in their congregation, and a little bit about what people in those particular times or stages in life are going through. And we don't do this so that you will now get out the rolls of your church and go down it and try to put people into these categories. Please don't do that. It doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that just the knowledge you have that you're speaking to people in all of these categories all at once, typically, when you're doing some kind of campaign. So if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it starts with survival. And this one will be, all of these resources are up on our diocesan website under Stewardship and Giving. I'm going to show you that in just a minute, but you can also put it in the search engine, and anything that you don't find there that you want, just let me know and we'll add it in. This is that same chart that I've done, hopefully in a way you can see it a little more. If you look at Maslow Meets Jesus, the survival need, first thing that we talk about is their time horizon. This is how far they can think ahead in their life. People in survival, it's 1 to 3 days. And we really believe that any congregation has about 10 or 15% of their congregation at any given time in that mode. And that makes sense. We would probably have a higher population of people in survival than other organizations might. The call on them, that means, what's most important to them that we could offer. And for survival mode, it's prayer. And the method is to meet immediate needs. Really, our response to them should be meeting their immediate needs. So teaching them how to pray, praying in a hopeful way. That's really what people in survival can deal with and need. And I want to caution you that survival, so often we hear it as economic, but in this case, survival can be anybody. It has nothing to do with wealth or age or survival. Some of the richest people in your congregation could be in survival mode and often are. Next is safety. Time horizon about 1 to 3 months. The percentage of the congregation, 30 to 35%. The call on them is to belong. By now, they've stepped a little bit closer in the congregation. They want to belong. Security is important for them. They are typically people that give when they can or when they're there. So they're still kind of in the transactional idea of giving to the church. They want to be generous. They want to give when they're there and it's on their mind. They're not thinking about it as an ongoing thing. Next is community. Usually the time horizon is about a year that they can think out, 35 to 40% of congregations. This is where you get your leaders. Often they want training. They want to be asked. They will start pledging. They want information. And they want to know that they're important to the community. So Terry Parsons used a kid on this that for these people, you need to plant about 8 typos in your annual report so that at the annual meeting, they can stand up and tell you they found the typos, and it gives them meaning, to know that they've been helpful. And so leadership is big. Now, this is where the break comes for the next one I'm going to show you, where we get into identity, meaning, and purpose. This is really the crowd that's been converted to a different way of thinking about their faith journey and also most likely about their giving. Identity, people can think out 3 to 5 years. They're about 10 to 15% of the congregation. The call on them is conversion. And it's a word that Episcopalians don't really like that much, but I think it's a good word and one that happens to us all the time. But conversion for them is to be converted to a deeper, newer way of life, a rule of life, and to be converted about things that they believed about faith, but may be questioning now. So a method with them is Bible study. These are people that actually ask you for Bible study. They want to learn more. Often with giving, they're fair share givers, which I don't really like fair share giving. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's fair. Actually, it's funny. It's called fair share because it's not really fair. If you divide up the number of people in a congregation and say, my fair share is this, it usually doesn't work. Because many people in your congregation probably can't pay that and shouldn't pay that. And there are many others that ought to be probably giving a lot more. And that's an example, fair share, of fundraising to me, but not really personal stewardship related to your spirituality. So I don't like fair share. There's a fair share program that's out that many of you have used. I would never use it because I don't like building that into what I think we should be talking about, but that's just one of the differences I have. Sometimes in identity, these are the people that will serve on vestry because they do want to change things. They want to help convert other people. They want to work for the ministry of the church, and they can envision 3 to 5 years out. So they're good people to ask for that. So, second to last one is meaning. Their time horizon is a lifetime. There's 9 to 12% in a congregation. The call on them is sacrifice, how to give more, how to give more of themselves, of their money. This is where they get beyond action. They want meaning in their life. They want education that gives them meaning. Action alone is not enough. And then finally is purpose. This is the famous self-actualized person, probably. Eternity is their time horizon. There's very small percentage of these people in the world, and definitely in our congregation, 1 to 3%. They're into martyrdom, literally. They tell stories about that. They love stories about that, and they want to tell stories about that. These are the sacrificial givers. We just don't see many of these, but often these people are giving 50 to 75% of their income away and have completely been converted way beyond even percentage giving or tithing. So again, we show this just to say that anytime you do a campaign, just like you're hitting all the generations, you're also hitting people at the stage in life that they might be in, and this is an example of that. So if you take all of that and then look at this graph, reasons for giving, this is kind of a collection of those two models I just showed you. Customers being kind of the when I show up, I'll give. Patrons or fair share givers. Also in patrons, you would have people that have decided, well, I'm a member of the Rotary Club and I give them $150 a month. So the church is like a club, I'll give them $150 a month. This is where the mode of giving, if I go into a congregation and ask, please make a list of all the pledges this year from the highest to the lowest, without names, just list the amounts. Almost always the mode, the average, is somewhere in the Episcopal Church around $1,200 to $1,500. And that is because those are nice round numbers, because most of our giving in the Episcopal Church, people fall into this patron category. Fair share giving or club giving, that's where they fall. And many of the people in here, if they were honest, as many of you were on the poll, will acknowledge that they don't know the percentage of their income they give, because they don't give by percentage, they give an amount. They have settled on a number and give an amount. So on this graph, you're looking at reasons for giving, metanoia and epistophy. That's the conversion change. It's where conversion will happen, and typically conversion here is to percentage giving. So partners at least would be able to answer the question what percentage they are giving. If you ask that question, they know the answer to that question. And then going deeper, the family are the people that were in purpose and meaning in the Maslow hierarchy. And often they're giving far more than 10%. They've given up on percentages and just almost saying how much can they give away. Giving away as much as they can becomes the most important thing. So I would say this graph is really important to show, because you have all of these people in these various stages in your congregation, and the job of the stewardship committee, to me, is not about creating the budget or hitting a target. It's creating the environment for people that are in these various stages, customers, patrons, partners, to move to the next level, to open a door and have them walk into the next thing. And the next thing for them might be the amount of money and not a percentage. And then the conversion happens and it would be percentage giving. But it's always making an opportunity for them to make, to grow into this and to learn more and to move into another category. So some of these were shared maybe 3 weeks ago in a video I did, which is still available. But I wanted to put these down, and we'll go through them quickly, but I think they're really important best practices right now. First of all, with all the stewardship efforts, there must be a foundation of prayer and a direct link to mission. We need your money is not a spiritual vision. Please remember that. I mean, in all of my time as a priest, actually, because I was fortunate enough to learn a lot of this before I was ordained, I've always said to a congregation, this church doesn't need your money. The church is God's endeavor, and the church will go on, whether we give to it or not. I'm convinced about that. But I do believe that as Christians, as faithful followers of Jesus, we personally, individually need to give. That's what this is about. It's not about us needing money. It's about our need to give back to be, and in order to be fully whole, to give back. So we need your money. Keep that out of your plan. Keep that out of your appeal. It's not about that. Let the finance committee or people that want to worry about the budget worry about the budget. You're worried about the personal lives of the people that are following Jesus, that are before you, and creating the environment for them to grow. The 5 pillars of stewardship are still at work. Prayer, which you've done. Case for support. Even a case for support, it's kind of an antiseptic words, but it really is important, even in an annual pledge drive. What is the case for support? Why should people support your ministry in your local context? Leadership, prospective donors, and planning. All of those things are still at work. Even in this crisis, all of those things have to be paid attention to. The goal for congregational stewardship at this time is to sustain and even grow giving if possible. Some of you, about 20% of you, said you think your income might actually grow through this time. And I'm with you. I think that could happen. I think with the right attention to this and the right formation around this, I think that can actually happen. Not asking at this time is only going to yield more suffering. So be bold and clear. Appeals must be characterized by hope, positivity, and gratitude, and not by apology or necessary evil language or any of that. It's hopeful, it's helpful, it's trying to help people grow and to be better in their faith. Know the giving habits of your people. How and with what frequency do they give? This made some of you be able to answer the questions we sent out a few weeks ago so much simpler because you knew this already. And for many of you, it was the first time you'd actually thought about knowing this kind of information, except for a few people. So if you know it, then you can address the current situation and recognize anomalies quicker if you know that already. Don't make assumptions. And we're making a lot of them now. Like the immediate assumption when this happened is everything's going to hell in a handbasket. You know, no money's ever going to come in again. Don't jump to those assumptions. Ask questions, do the research, gather the data, talk to your people. Look at your trend and data before you act. The vestry should have this as a priority agenda item in every meeting, not only in crisis, but all the time. Do your vestry members know your average pledge? Can they rattle that off? Do they know what the average pledge is in a congregation? Do they know how pledges have changed from last year to this year? You should know that. What are your local patterns? Which ones are healthy and which you need to work on with formation? And then remember that giving is an act of worship. Our tradition, including our rubrics, do not allow this to be an option. That's my personal belief. It's not an option. We do have an offering. We give people the opportunity every time we gather to give. So make the most of the offertory moment, even in virtual liturgy. I'm seeing this done very well. You all are highlighting it. Make easy on-screen prompts and include an offertory appeal in the service leaflet if you have one. Instructions should be clear and simple. For example, please visit this parish website to make your offering at this time. So let's look at online giving because from a nuts and bolts standpoint, this has become extremely important in this time. And if you're not doing it, you should be. If you are not doing it, you don't take anything else from this, take that from this. If you haven't already put this on your website, you should, in earnest, be working to choose a way to do this. There are many vendors to choose from. Out here, we've got the website. And then thanks to Carrie and our finance department, we now offer a direct and easy way for you to offer this to your congregation on our diocesan website. And I'll give you the link. Here you're going to find a unique link for your local congregation. Every one of our congregations has a link where people can make credit card and online offerings, and then we collect it and we will send it to your congregation after we've collected. quite a few are using this format now. We sent out checks to a lot of congregations and people are giving this way, so we know that some of you are using it. This is what it looks like, that website, and right now I'm going to try to go and open up that website and show that to you. And as I do it, I do want to tell you that a lot of people have had an issue with this, and I want to tell you what it often is. I almost hear it every time, is the fees. No matter what service you use for online giving, you're going to incur fees. And so people get really worked up about this. They say, oh, but the person gave $100 to St. Andrews, Aberdeen, but the church is only going to get $96.80 because of the fee. And that's true. But I always ask them, would you rather get $96.80 of 100 or 0 of 100? Well, I don't know about you, but I'd rather get 96.80 of 100. So then the person might argue, well, but the person believes they gave 100 and we're only getting 96.80. That's true. And you can make that statement if you want to, so they know it. But for the IRS, this is the leap sometimes people will make, that we're not telling the truth to the IRS. It's totally not true. When somebody gives on our website or your website to your church at $100, that's what they get to claim, no matter what. The fee is the cost of doing business, which you've chosen, we've chosen to be part of and to take part in order to get that $96.80. So I'd much rather get 96.80 of 100 than 0 of 100. And that's the way you're going to do it if you have online giving. So with this website, what we've tried to do is give you, and if you scroll down on this, you would see that every church has a link. And if you find that you don't, let us know. But we've tested all these and they do work. And in a little while we're in Q&A, I may go to one of these screens. But the other thing that people were worried about is they say, well, I had to go to the diocesan website and then I had to push the give button and then I had to go. You don't have to do that. These links, if you use these links, it will take you directly to the donation page to your church, specifically for your church. So the person has one step. They hit this link, or however you presented it to them, they go to that page and they're able to give. So it's just an offering. Nobody has to use it, but we wanted to provide it so that you didn't have to go through trying to find a vendor now in the midst of all this, in a way that you can instantly provide a way for people to give with credit cards. So that's what this is about. So let's look at online giving for a minute. And here are some key terms. Online giving, it refers to the ability of a donor to complete a gift online. All right, that's all that means. Recurring giving is the ability of a donor to set up their giving amount, frequency, and method. So for instance, on our diocesan website, I can give monthly to carbon offsets, which I do, and give monthly to some of our ministries, which I do. It's set up, it automatically comes out every month. I don't have to think about it, but I know that I'm giving it. Homepage refers to the first page someone sees when they type in the central web address of your church's website. So the homepage is your opening page. You want to make the giving option as close to that page. Some version of it needs to be on that page, and then only one click away to go to where they donate. And this is what I was saying with our list that we provided for you. You actually don't even have to have them go to the home page. There's no need for that. If you use the link that we provided, you can put that on your home page, and when they click that, it's going to go directly to the page that has your church already put in there, and for them to give to your church. So you break down the pages they have to go through. to get to it. The donation page refers to that page, the page where a donor is able to actually finally complete the transaction and make a gift. And then mobile giving, and this refers to the ability of a donor to complete their gift on a mobile device and includes mobile specific functionality such as text to give that's unique to mobile devices. So you want to see if you can cover all of those bases when you look at online giving. Here are some ways you can strengthen our websites. Make the giving button on your homepage obvious, typically at the upper right corner of your homepage. The giving button should be only one click away from the donation page. As I was saying, make it as quick as you can and as easy to get to as you can. Ensure your donation page is easy to navigate. Try to get it all on one page. Everything they need to do in order to make a donation. Tell stories of life change on your donation page. Even on the diocesan site, we're not doing this, but if you go to many ministries like the American Friends, the Diocese of Jerusalem, on the donation page will also be stories of why it's important and compelling to give to that organization. We can do that too. And then check the default settings established by your service provider to make sure that those are settings that you can live with and that you want. Adjust your options when it comes to giving type, frequency, and fund options. So those are some of the things you'll get to decide. Not so much with ours, because you've got to go with what we've decided. But if you get your own vendor, you can make some of those decisions. Have a gratitude plan. How are you going to say thank you? In our system, there's an immediate thank you that goes to the donor, so you can already count on that. But you, I believe, locally need to follow up as well with a letter of thank you that they gave, unless they're giving it anonymously somehow and you don't know. But if you know who it is, or even if you don't know who it is, but you know how to contact them, we really do need to say that you've received it and say that you're thankful for it. And then make sure your website is optimized for viewing on tablets and on phones, because in many situations they are not. All right, I wanted to share a couple of resources with you. First one is Horizons Stewardship. This is their homepage of their website. Christine Miller is one of the principals in this group, and I worked with her early on in my stewardship days. Some of you have already used Horizons Stewardship, and have, there's some great articles on this website. And so I highly recommend that you take a look at this. The other one is TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. Olympia has been very involved in this over the years. For a while, half the board was from the Diocese of Olympia. We changed that, but it's a great organization, and we have diocesan membership. And if you see here, we have a username and password that is our Olympia credentials. So you might jot these down. You can also going to get copies of these slides, and we can send this out as well. But you can use these credentials to get all the resources that are on the TENS website. And if you look to the right here, where it says Faith-Filled Generosity, that is their 2020 campaign, their kind of canned campaign that's there for you to use. And they have campaigns from years past, so you can even use some of those. They have bulletin inserts and all kinds of material so that you don't have to build it from scratch. So I highly recommend this website for articles, for campaigns. There's lots of resources there, and we pay for a diocesan memberships so that anybody from the diocese can go and use it. So I hope you'll avail yourselves of that. That's what their website looks like. That's the home page. And if you look up there under resources, that's where you go to find the login page for member resources. And you are a member by virtue of being in the Diocese of Olympia. You can use all the resources on this page that you want to and can. This is the web page for our diocesan website, where you will find, hopefully soon, the slides from this presentation. You'll find Maslow Meets Jesus chart there, all kinds of things from the Bishop's Leadership Conference that I taught stewardship for last year. just anything that we've collected that could be helpful for legacy giving, life planning, all of that is on this page. And the specific link is this. And I know you can't capture that right now, but you'll get these slides and we can send this link to you in other ways as well. So now we're at Q&A, and I honestly have not been keeping track of that. So I'm going to see how we want to do this. April, do you have a list, or how do we want to do it?
For the Q&A, we've kind of been sorting through the questions as we go, and I think you can just start from the top. If we want to clarify for anyone, just say the word and I'll invite them to speak.
Okay. And I know there's some raised hands out there too, so
I think that's cleared up. I think we're okay there.
okay, all right, great. So let's go through some of the questions then. And before I do that, I'm going to invite Mark Rickel to, if he's still on, to come on and to add anything he'd like to add, and just to introduce himself to all of you. And he can make his offer in person that he made to me and that I sent out. Mark, are you still there?
I am indeed, and thanks for the opportunity to join you in conversation this afternoon. I appreciate it. We had a wonderful time with clergy this morning, and now to be able to be a part of this again, I appreciate it. Just a brief word of introduction. My name is Mark Rickel, and I serve with the Enrichment Group. We consult with Christian congregations around various stewardship appeals, annual and capital. Group has been around for several decades. My time with the group goes back now 20 years. And so from that perspective, I began this work just shortly after 9/11 and the topsy-turvy world at that time, and certainly in campaigns through the 2008 recession. Now again, we find ourselves in a somewhat different time. So that lends a bit of perspective to my work. But I've been very blessed over the years now to serve more than 100 congregations in one type of capital or annual appeal or other, many of them within the Diocese of Olympia. And that's in part what motivated my offer to Bishop Gregg. I have a deep love for the parishes of the diocese, and the partnerships that we've been able to form with many congregations has been so blessed. I believe that it's an opportunity for me to serve and to give back in some way to you. And so my offer to congregations at this point is to be an available resource to you for conversation with your stewardship teams or with your vestries as you consider particularly annual stewardship and or capital stewardship programs going forward. And the conversations are free of charge. It's simply an opportunity for us perhaps to spend a little bit of time together and share some support, some strategies, and some encouragement for you. So again, my thanks to Bishop Gregg for including me in this conversation. My thanks to those of you that I've had the blessing to work with, and my offer is there for others if you'd like to connect. Bishop Gregg knows, I think has put the information out, but feel free to contact me if you'd like my direct contact information as well. I'm happy to serve you in some capacity. If this is an appropriate time also, Greg, I'd be happy to just share just a couple of underscores from the wonderful information that the Bishop has shared with you today. The first is that what has worked for you in the past will work for you in this time as well. Even though it's a very different time, the things that you do well already in stewardship are still applicable now. The second thing is to make sure that you lead with gratitude. One of the best antidotes to the scarcity mentality, to the uncertainty, to the anxiety and nervousness in this time is to say thank you and to remind people that you are capable. Even in a very different time, the congregations you serve have capacity for doing incredible ministry. And so hearing thank you and hearing gratitude is important increasingly in this time. People want to know that their gifts make a difference, that the ministry that they serve makes a difference. And the last point, Bishop Greg referred to it early in his presentation, but it's so important because I've heard it multiple times in the congregational conversations that I've been having recently, and that is to be very wary of any apologetic language. Oftentimes in difficult times, we think we are being kind by saying to people, oh, don't think twice about giving. I know that it's so difficult, you know, just don't even worry about that. And we do so with all good intent. We think we are alleviating stress from people and taking that burden off of them. The reality, however, is that that apologetic language or apologetic action becomes dismissive and demeaning to people. It strips them of their capacity. And we don't mean to do that, but that's what the effect can be. And so while we be sensitive certainly to situations and to people, make the ask and be bold in terms of lifting up the ministry of the church and the resourcing of it. This is as an appropriate a time as any, if not more so. So no apologies in that regard. But again, lead with gratitude. Gratitude will always take you in the right direction. So my thanks again for being a part of this conversation. Happy to chime in beyond this as it's appropriate.
Thank you, Mark, very much. All right, let's take Q&A, and I'm going to go through the questions we have. Let me say that we were scheduled to end at 4, and any of you that need to can, but I'm committed to staying with you until we can get through these questions within some reason. I mean, we won't be doing this at 6 o'clock, I don't think, but don't worry, at 4 o'clock it's not going to cut off, but if you need to, you can. So the first question, I'm trying to take these in order they came in. I know I'm worried about the expected decline in giving and income in our parish with so many losing their jobs. What does the diocese anticipate seeing with their income, and how are they intending to assist parishes, specifically around assessment relief? So the poll shows us we most all have the same question. Maybe you're going to answer this. Well, I'm going to try. So we actually have probably a reserve, I think, in the diocese office of bishop of about 800,000, maybe really 6 if you consider our red line and keeping our people employed, which means we could probably give 2 months of total assessment relief before we'd have no money left. So we made a decision not to do that, or not to offer that right away, because we're all waiting to see what it means for our income. But I think what I want to disavow you of is the notion that somehow the diocese has a bottomless end of funds that we can pull from forever. We're much the same as you, and quite frankly, we're very dependent upon assessments in order to have any income. Over the past 13 years since I've been bishop, never have we cut the money that we're giving back to congregations through grants and all that. We have left that as sacrosanct. Meanwhile, cutting many of our staff, cutting a lot of our programs to get us to the 14.5% assessment rate. The way I would answer this is that, and what we decided is, if you all start seeing decreases, then you're going to, because we're on real-time assessment, you're already getting some relief by giving us 14.5% of whatever percentage you get that is coming in. The other thing that we decided is to wait and see what the PPP program would provide for people and what it might not provide. And we're seeing a lot more people. Today I've heard of 2 or 3 other parishes that got funded in this most recent dispersal. So some of that's happening too. So the answer is complicated, but it's also that, yes, we do have the funds to give relief, but we're really still discerning what that will look like and when to do it, because this could go on a while. And instead of rushing out and spending everything we have right now, we really do want to see what's going to happen. To our income, the answer is we don't know, because we're reliant on what happens with you. But what we have committed to do, and what we're continuing to do, just so you know, is we're paying our full asking to the Episcopal Church still. We haven't cut that back at all, and we don't intend to unless we have to. So I know that's not a complete answer, but that's the answer I'd give to that. Second question, in the statistics when the numbers are given, is this a reference to how many out of 10 people? This is for those stats that don't involve percentages. Yes, if it says 3 to 4, it's out of 10, I believe is right, or out of 100%. I don't know because I'm not looking at all of this right now with you, but I think that's right. Next question, is there any data or expert opinion about raising funds in an election year? This is such an important election year, perhaps there is no projection. I've only seen a little bit of research. It's a good question. I've only seen a little bit of research about that, and it doesn't have great effect on giving in the church. Now, Mark may have other something else he wants to say about that, but I think that that's less of an issue for us. It does have some impact sometimes on other organizations. For instance, the ACLU or some of those kind of organizations. Election years can really change those. And of course, political organizations get a ton of different donations then, but the research I've seen, it's not much, is that election years don't have a big impact.
Agreed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just agreed. The only impact may be in terms of simply timing of activities around the actual election date. And so strategically, you may do some things slightly different in an election year. However, in terms of the impact on funding, no.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Next question. We have started a year-round stewardship program, monthly talks by individual members about their walk and how they live out their stewardship, time, talent, and giving. This is envisioned as a singular presentation per month. Should we increase the monthly sharing? Our idea is to engage membership in their personal living out Christ's plea to us. Well, I mean, I'm so glad you're doing it monthly. I think that's fantastic. That's more than a lot of people are doing, and I would keep that up. And I would say, yeah, anything more you can do is a good thing. And also, I'm hoping, and it looks like this is true from what you're asking, that it's across the board. It's about time, it's about talent, it's about giving. I would even throw in the environment or, God's creation as being something we steward also, and that can be part of it. I didn't talk about it today, but I talked a lot more about this morning in that webinar that I did a year experiment at St. James in Austin of asking for money for something outside the church and different every single Sunday for a year to test the myth that people say all we do is ever ask for money and that's going to wear us down. And as I shared there, we took in about 80,000 more that year. And I never had any pushback, except for my treasurer, who came to me about 6 months in and said, you got to stop doing that. And I thought that he would say, because it's affecting our capital campaign or our pledge campaign or something. But he said, you got to stop doing that because it's going to affect our assessment. It's going to go up. And, I just told him that's the kind of problem I like to have. So, but we did that and really didn't have any ramifications. So in some ways, it's the answer of your question that we did that every single Sunday, and it didn't seem to do anything except increase the generosity of the people and also get them, we're using all these metaphors, vaccinated against the, the notion that somehow asking for money is a bad thing or that you've got to give every time it happens. People got very comfortable with the fact that we did that. It was okay. So I would say, yeah, the more, the merrier. Stewardship's our way of life, and so it's an everyday thing, not just a once a month thing or once a year thing. You ask about how much percentage-wise goes to the church for us. Only about a half of our giving goes to church. Seems to be lots of other worthwhile ways to give. How do you answer this? Okay, I give 10% always to the church. I give about 16.5 to 17% this year away. And that other 6.5% goes to other things. But what I personally do, I think that's what you're asking, what I personally do is I've always given 10% to the church. And then I give over that to other things, because I agree with you. There are many other worthwhile things to give to. And theologically, for me, this comes from what I believe is true out of especially the Old Testament. Even because, the New Testament is basically the reign of Christ is that we don't give 10%, we give 100%. And Jesus asked for 100%. He changes the 10 to 100, which, if we're really worried about money, we should all go back to being Jewish, because, that was a better deal, actually. And Jesus now is asking for 100%. We still stick with the 10% because that was the model, and it's a good model from the Old Testament. But also what's true, I think theologically from the Old Testament, is that 10% was an expectation. You really weren't even seen as a giver if you gave 10%. You were seen as living up to what's expected of the faithful, period. Alms, or actual giving, started after the 10%. And that's one reason I actually practice that in my life, that the giving starts after the 10. So that's just my personal way of being. All right, next, so what about, should anyone else know what people pledge or give? Your bookkeeper surely knows. What happens when money is secret? This is a great question. Thank you. I'm trying not to tell names, but I'd love to share a name because I'm so glad you asked it. But I think when money is secret, we give it more power. Anything in your congregation that you refuse to talk about when everybody knows it's a part of their life and they're marinated in it, gives it power. And the reason money has so much power in our church, even though we never talk about it, is for just that purpose. We stick it in the corner, we apologize for it, we try to avoid it as much as we can, and yet it has tremendous power, because nothing unites us like the fact that money is so crucial to all of our lives in so many ways. So, this goes back to the idea that I think the priest ought to know. I'm a firm believer in that. I wouldn't take a call at a local congregation unless they agreed to it, because I do believe it's spiritual malpractice not to know, because many, many people will make their cries for help, their pastoral needs known only through that. Now, as for others, treasurer, bookkeeper, I think, yes, many of those people are going to have to know just by virtue of what it is their job is. But I think a priest ought to know, not simply because they do have a responsibility under Title IV, the disciplinary canons of the church, to oversee finances. They can actually be brought up on charges for not overseeing them. And I shared with the clergy today that, in fact, the most pastoral directives I've had to do in my 13 years, the largest percentage of any category is in the financial, not the sexual, the financial mismanagement, oversight. So I believe if they're going to be held to that account, they ought to know exactly what's going on. But I also believe it's a pastoral, and more importantly, a pastoral thing for them to look at. I've heard it put this way. There's all kinds of problems with this metaphor, but if priests are the doctors of the church, and we argue about that, but we will go to a doctor and completely take our clothes off and let them probe into all kinds of areas of our body without much thought about it, except it being a good thing. and hopefully they'll find something good. I think there's a lot of similarities in this. We can't be the full spiritual leader of a group of people unless we know the most that we can about them, about their lives, and be willing to hold that confidentially. People will argue typically that if a priest knows, they'll show favoritism. And I will tell you, if that's the case, then you have a lack of trust, and it doesn't matter what you know or what you don't know. You have a lot bigger problems than whether the priest knows. I've never actually seen that to be a problem. I've seen it be accused as being a problem, but I've never seen what I believe it to be a real problem. All right, that was a long answer, but I'm glad you asked it. I'd love to hear more about why Greg believes the clergy should know what parishioners give to the church. Well, I just did that, I think. Glad to say more, but I don't think you can be the true leader, the spiritual leader, and have me also believe that money is a deeply spiritual issue and to keep those things separated. I just don't believe you can do that or should do that. We have surveyed parishioners regarding pledge levels during isolation COVID-19. Overwhelmingly, respondents expected to fulfill pledges, with several households increasing pledges or offering one-time gifts. How would you suggest we keep such enthusiasm and commitment high as the months with COVID-19 mount? Well, I think there's two things on that. One is going to be where this goes, which none of us know. I mean, some people are financially fine right now and are still getting their salaries, and hopefully that will stay the same, but it could be that doesn't stay the same, and so this may be different. But I think you keep that enthusiasm going as you do any other time of the year, and that's more challenging, I understand right now, but it's through connection. It's through community. If there was a need for community ever, it's much heightened now. Of course, our challenge is how do we keep that community going when we're separated? But it's that creativity, it's thinking through that is going to be really what I think will be the most compelling thing for people to keep giving. Also, I think this is a time when we've spent a lot of time in the last 6 weeks kind of inward focused because we've had to be. I believe that. We've had to come up with virtual worship. We've had to figure out, what life's going to be like. All of that's true, but the longer this goes on, we've got to shift that focus again to the outside, what we can do to be Christ in the world. And I think as we get really creative about that and do that, that also will be compelling to the people when they see that the church is making a difference in this moment. Then I think that will continue to keep that up. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad you said it. That is what we're hearing, is that even though we rush to the skies falling and, we're not going to be able to keep our doors open, that most people are keeping their pledges up. There's still the majority of people have said we're going to do that. So thank you. Next question. Choir music is a big part of what people say they like about our church, and that it has to affect giving. It sounds like choir could be one of the riskiest activities until there's a vaccine. No, you're not wrong about that. I think you're right. How are folks planning to deal with this in the fall? So we're just now starting to talk about things like that, reopening and what are the restrictions going to be. And singing clearly is something that many of these reopening plans, strategies are addressing. And many of them are addressing it with that they're not quite certain, of course, but that they're very concerned about that being a mode of transmission. So I can tell you in some of the discussions I've had with choirs, and this has actually come up a lot more than you think. I'll just tell you some of the ones that are being bantied around. And these are not requirements. Please do not, and we're recording this, so I'm saying this is not the bishop telling you to do this. This is the bishop being asked a question and answering what I've heard and know, but it's not what I'm telling you to do. Some people are actually going to not have music for the safety of their people, and especially the ones singing, but of everyone. Some have thought about this in great detail. For instance, you can keep a choir 6 feet apart and projecting in one direction, but usually they're projecting towards either the congregation, depending on how close they are, or the director, who is really in the line of fire. So some of them have said, we're not going to do that. We're going to all face the same direction, so at least we're projecting out that way. I don't know how they do that, but a lot of your spaces will dictate this as well. There's no easy answer to that. I think, though, one of the interesting things to think in this is that I have to believe whatever guidelines we come out with or the health authorities do, one of them is going to be that we wear a mask in public, in meetings, in church, and that will include a choir. So even more importantly is thinking through how you're going to do that. I've been amazed at some of these Zoom choirs, how great they sound. And so music has not been completely left out of many services. And many of you have gotten creative with having a soloist there and stuff like that, and it's worked really well. So I think you can still have music, but that projection of people singing is a real issue. And I'm not quite sure yet how that will play out, but it's a good question. Thank you. Next question is, what is fair share giving? Okay, well, I said a little bit about that, but I'll say just a little bit more in case it didn't get answered. But fair share giving typically goes like this. A person figures out there are 200 members at that church. The budget is this amount. I'm going to divide it by that, and that's my fair share. The problem with that is, as I said before, there are people in your congregation that could never pay whatever that number is. And there are people in the congregation that ought to be paying 10 times more than that number. But ultimately, my answer is, that's the practicality, that's the technicality. Ultimately, my answer is, this isn't about making the budget. It's not about fundraising. What I'm talking about today, and what I wish we would talk about as stewardship, is the need of individual people to give, to have the fullest and wholest Christian existence and life in this world. That's what I'm talking about. So if you do it that way, fair share giving is not the way to do it. I hope that adds more to that. Question, as to percentage giving, some define the tithes as all giving, not just to the church. What is the best approach to these partners? Well, you know, honestly, it's almost like that other question. If they're tithing, even if it's not all of the church, they're way ahead of many people and probably very generous even to the church. It's an argument that's worth having philosophically, but it's not the biggest argument to me we ought to be having. Number one, I think there's two huge steps that a person can make that most people, most Christians aren't doing. One is giving whatever you give first. So some of you have seen an essay I did. I think it's up on our website. The firstness is more important than the tenthness. And what I mean by that is giving first, whatever it is you give, is a more important practice than what the percentage is. The second thing is the percentage to me. But I think the practice of giving first instead of out of what's left over is one of the greatest shifts you can make. And so, you know, how you define the tithe is farther down the list to me. And that's when you dig into the Bible, you dig into theology, you dig into your own self-reflection about this and figure out, what is the tithe going to be for me? And who do I give that to? But more important to me is giving first, and then knowing the percentage that you give, whatever it is most important. In the category of we need your money being an inappropriate approach, would you say that to say basically we need to pay our bills, or a business just like any other business would similarly not be an appropriate thing to say? Yes. I don't think it's an appropriate thing to say. For a stewardship committee, so hear me out. I mean, if stewardship is your task, if stewardship training and formation is your task, then I think that those two statements, or any way you would put that, should be as far away from coming out of your mouth of anything, because that's not what we're doing. Now, a finance chair that deals with the budget every day, or a bookkeeper or a treasurer, might well make that statement, and I think it's perfectly fine. They're telling the truth. You know, if we're going to have this building, if we're going to have, you know, gatherings here in this building, we're going to have the lights on and pay our taxes and our insurance or whatever we've got to pay. All that's a reality. It's not, we don't need to lie about it. I'm just saying that the stewardship work of the church doesn't include those things. That's somebody else's issue, somebody else's problem, somebody else's battle to fight. Ours is different in stewardship. It's different. And I just don't like those two things to bleed into each other. We did well following your guidance for 2019. We think stewardship is more than fundraising, but we'd love to hear an idea about activities other than pledge-related ones. Okay, well, there's a lot on year-round giving that is on the TENS site and also the Horizon site, the two resources I gave you. Also, there's some of that on our site under Stewardship and Giving. I broke it out into 4 different categories. One was time, so how we use our bodies, our skills, our time. How do we use that for the betterment of the church? That's one thing to focus on. One is the environment, as I said, creation. So we just had Earth Day. My stewardship committees in the last 10 years of my priesthood really did a lot with creation, a lot with Earth Day. We even had a pledge drive for Earth Day, which I can tell you all more about if you haven't heard me talk about that before. We did pledge drives for time and talent. And then the fourth area, well, the fourth area is money, but I think it's actually the smallest area, even though we spend the most time and energy on it. The biggest area to me is relationships. Stewardship of our relationships is among the most important things. So we also did a lot around Labor Day. We celebrated the labor of people, the vocations of people. And I have a whole thing on that I can give you too, but many of you have heard me talk about that. And if you haven't and you want me to, maybe that's another webinar we could do sometime, is based on those. But yes, there's many other things during the year. I would say on that, don't try to put these together and do them at the same time. Do the money as the money, and do it, be clear about it. Don't muddy it up with anything else. So yes, I'm against pledge cards that have on the flip side time and talent. I just can't stand them. Please stop. Most people that use these don't care about time and talent. They put it on there to soft sell what's really on your mind, which is asking for their pledge. And we've been able to show that 55 to 60% of the time, nobody hears anything from the time and talent. Nobody does anything with that part, which proves that it wasn't that important. What was important was getting the pledge. Don't do that. Do a really good time and talent pledge drive, but do it in another time. Do it another time of year where you focus only on that. And do the same with creation. Do the same with Labor Day or whatever you might want to do. All right. Has giving changed due to the changes in income tax law, or will they? I do not know. We don't see, I can say this, I don't know how we would test the correlation between those two things, but I would say that the percentages that I've shared with you really have not changed that much over time, or even in crisis when it comes to giving to the church. The percentages stay about the same. People are compelled to give, they're generous, and I'm not sure how we would check that. You're asking a good question, but I just don't know how we would do that. Next worship, May 10th, yes. Well, if that's a question, are we going to be able to worship face-to-face by May 10th? I cannot give you about that right now. I don't know when that will be, and I can tell you probably without a doubt that whenever the authorities open up whatever opening looks like to us, I'm probably going to still give the local context the chance to continue what they're doing or to open up. And let me tell you why. I'm quite convinced that our first phase will be probably holding gatherings that are 50 or less. So with many, many congregations that we have, that's going to be too many people. If you just open the doors and say, everybody come, it's going to be too many people. So larger congregations might actually have to think twice about whether they reopen under those guidelines or not, or if they do, how they do. Other places in our diocese where 50 has not been an average Sunday attendance that they've had for years may well be able to open under those guidelines and do this face-to-face. So it's going to be very contextual. I've been telling everyone, and I think most of you know this that are on here, it's not going to be like flipping a light switch. We're not going to one day wake up and say, okay, everybody go back to what you were doing. It's just not going to happen. And it's not going to happen in the church either. So I think May 10th may be a little bit ambitious. The date I've been using, only speculation, I know nothing other than this, is June 1st. And, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know what's going to happen. And I want to be clear about that. All right, we have no open questions. What I want to remind you about is that we do have this recorded. We do plan to post it. You can use it for yourself. You can use it for your stewardship team, your vestry, whatever you want to do if you want to. I think we'll also have the chat up and maybe the questions. I can't remember how that works, but you'll get to see all this nonetheless, again, if you want to. And I also just want to reiterate that if there are things that you saw on this, heard about on this, and you can't find them anywhere else, just send me an email and I will do my very best to get to you any of the materials that you need. So I really quickly went back to the website because I wanted to show you the online giving and just go through here. You can see that every church has a link that they could use. All right. I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm sorry we went over today, but I really appreciate those of you that hung in there. Still about 100 of you on, and I really appreciate that. God bless you all. And I really look forward to the day where I get to see you face to face. We're going to leave this on for a while in case you need to look at anything that's on here, and so that we can capture everything and make sure before we shut it down. But I am about to go off here. And so thank you all. And I'm pretty sure I'm not hearing from April, anybody that I've left anybody out who wanted to ask a question. So I'm going to sign off. Mark, thank you. April and Carrie, thank you for being behind the scenes too. Bless you, everybody, and see you soon, I hope.